let's start at the beginning. I mean, where did the idea come from?
Weirdly, two places. One was I was actually learning how to play the trumpet. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to make a sitcom about a jazz band? And that's literally where the idea started from. And then it sounds odd, the fact that time travel plays such a big part of it, but I was like, oh, I don't want them to be, jazz bands at that time would have come over from America or Jamaica or stuff like that. And I was like, I don't really want them to have accents. I kind of want them to just speak as themselves. Yeah. So I was like, what if it was like a modern jazz band that just went back to the 1920s? And then that's how it was kind of born. So it's quite a weird way to kind of get there, but yeah.
That's really interesting because, I thought you might have started with the time travel idea, but that's kind of curious.
I feel a bit guilty sometimes because it plays such a big role, and I know how it plays such a big role, and so many people I've spoken to have really tried and failed to make time travel sitcoms work. But the fact that I just chucked that in at the end. I do feel a little bit guilty, but yeah.
I don't think you should feel guilty. I think it's great. Okay, it's a great device. But also, I think it's interesting because you've started with the normality in the characters and the scenario, and that's, it's very much grounded in those relationships, isn't it?
Yeah, and do you know what? I think the reason why it works is because I did it that way round, and I think when I spoke to a lot of people who said, "Oh, I remember I was developing a time travel show," I think they got too bogged down in the details of time travel.
Right.
And I think writing it, you'd be surprised how much of it I actually had to strip back, because once I brought in that time travel element, and I was like, oh, this is great. And obviously, being a big fan of Back to the Future, as you could probably tell, and so I kind of jumped on that, and I was like, cool, okay, all right, let's do this. And then these are the rules, and these are and then you slowly realize is that the majority of people don't care. It was just like, just get to the past. I don't really care how the time machine works. I don't care if, it's great for Back to the Future, but no one was like, I don't care if you got it from the Russians. Like, just get in the lift and go home. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of why it helps is, like you said, I just concentrated on the characters first and foremost, and then the time travel was just a lovely element that I added to it.
Well, let's talk a bit about Back to the Future, because you say there's references in this episode and in subsequent episodes. I would definitely, I think, in the second series, there's some very interesting, fun, explicit in-jokes. When did you first see that film, and what relationship did you have with it when you were younger?
Do you know what? It's odd, and it's similar with, I think I just grew up with Steven Spielberg kind of films as in general, and there was, I'm saying that because I'm a big fan of Jurassic Park. So I use that. And someone asked me a similar question of like, when was the first time I ever watched it? And I genuinely can't remember, but I've seen it at least 200 times, at least. I'm not even joking.
Similar to myself, I would
say.
Really?
Yeah. And I love it. And it was the same with Back to the Future, where I can't remember the first time I ever watched it, but I think it's just one of those films that is just like embedded within me. Do you know what I mean? And it's very much like, so even though I can't remember the first moment or my first reactions to it, it's another film that I've seen so many times. And I think so much of Timewasters or my work in general, it very much feeds to that time of film. It's just within me, and it was the films that me and my brothers just used to sit together and watch together, and it's just in me. A bit like Red Dwarf as well. I remember, I don't remember the first time I ever watched Red Dwarf, but I remember my brothers were obsessed with it, and so they'd play it all the time, and so it's very much it's just in me, do you know what I mean? And I just know those characters, even though I can't sit down and kind of go, that's the moment.
How does it feel to be here then with the Red Dwarf guys?
I know, it's a bit surreal. Like when it's like the fact that it's side by side. So it's very odd. The fact that just there's minds happening going, oh, these two things sit together. I'm like, no, what? No, that's Red Dwarf. Like, and then this is just Timewasters. So it's a little bit insane. Yeah.
So how did you land on some of the things we see in that first episode there in terms of who they would meet, what era they would go back to, and particularly let's say with the comic opportunities in mind?
So 1920, I suppose that it was just it was the jazz age, and it was like
Yeah.
a jazz band going to the jazz age, and so it was very much 1920s. And then also, I think it was just like a time of extravagance, and it was just a time. Do you know what I mean? And so it looks beautiful. I mean,
There's a lot of champagne drunk in this.
oh my god,
So much champagne.
champagne, cocaine, just like people just go all out. And I remember a film, Bright Young Things.
Oh yeah.
Which is like, I love that film, and it's similar. It's just that's where characters like Victoria and Ralph are based on, and it's just those basically bright young things who would just spend their time partying and not having a care in the world. So that's kind of where those kind of, I think that's why it sat quite nicely within 1920s, just so I could play. And also it's that great culture clash as well. Do you know what I mean? It's like these guys from an estate in London then go into like London, wealth, money, champagne. So it was the perfect kind of clash of cultures, fish out of water. So it was just like the perfect recipe, I think.
We are talking about comedy today, but obviously you do raise some serious issues in this, to do with race in particular. I remember I wrote an article for The Guardian years ago, why can't women time travel? Because I was so sick of seeing time travel films. Basically, they are normally about white men, right? And so obviously Red Dwarf is an exception here, but for you, I mean, was it quite a nice, important thing to kind of breaking new ground in some ways, because you really don't see many black characters in time travel?
100%, and I think it lends to what I was saying earlier. There was two reasons why I wrote it, but another reason was, first of all, it was like there wasn't that many like black characters on screen in general, so I really wanted to make an ensemble piece with an all black cast. But also as well, you're right, as in like we never sit in the space of sci-fi. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it was very much the era. I feel like now we're slowly kind of breaking out of it, but a lot of the shows that were coming out were always kind of dealing with the same kind of topics and the same kind of themes. Do you know what I mean? So it was actually quite nice to do something completely different, and I think that's why a lot of people warmed to it, particularly the cast as well. Like they loved, like all the people that came in. They were just like, oh my God, they were just like, it wasn't just so much that they enjoyed the show itself, which they found very funny.
Of course.
But I think it was just like being part of something. And so it was funny when we did our very first read through for ITV, and at the end of it, the commissioner came up to me and she was like, oh, I can't believe you got all your friends to kind of come and do this and cast your friends and stuff. And I was like, I don't know these people. But I think what was so lovely is because everyone kind of really took it to heart, and they just really wanted they knew that it was something different and something new and something that people would really warm to. So yeah. You
all gel really well together on screen, and the characters are great fun comedically as well. I mean, how did you land in that kind of mix? Because I know there's certain sort of sitcom tropes like the less intelligent person and so on, for example, but they're very, very funny. But yeah, how did you land on that kind of mix of the
I mean, I loved shows like, I loved shows like, a lot of the things I was basing it on and getting it over the line is, I was selling it on the idea of like the in-betweeners. Like I love the in-betweeners, and you can see some of those parallels. And then I love those shows where you have ensemble pieces with those kind of characters, like It's Always Sunny or Community, and so when I kind of landed on them, they were kind of like stuff that was already kind of like in my mind. I already knew the kind of character that I kind of wanted to play, and I knew. Yeah, if truth be told, that's actually quite a hard question. I don't actually know how I landed on them, but they just kind of felt right, I think. And some of it is like all the characters are actually named after my siblings.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I think that kind of helped as well. I mean, my brother Jason is not as easygoing as this Jason.
Okay. So they have other things in common?
Yeah, I mean, my brother was a ladies' man, and that is Jason.
Okay.
I play Nick, my brother Nicholas, and he is quite like much more uptight, and he'd be a bit like, I don't understand why we're getting in this lift. So that would be true.
Seems like a fair question, actually.
I mean, it's a piss-filled lift. So I think that probably helped as well. Sorry, I'm just trying to cast my mind back
Yeah.
to all those years ago. But yeah, I think that's probably where a lot of them kind of came from.
And what was the filming experience like for you?
It was great. It was actually really lovely. It was like the writing process was quite weird, and it was quite like it was quite a difficult process, kind of going through it. But once we kind of got to set, like we all got on and we all gelled, and so it was just quite fun. And also it was different as well. And so it's very strange to do I think that's what ITV was pivoting into alongside with Plebs, is that to do period pieces were quite, it's not that they didn't exist because you had like Hundaby and Up the Women and stuff like that. So it's not that they didn't exist. It was just there were few and far between. A lot of shows when this was about were very much like flat shares or set in a supermarket, or do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas this was slightly different. So it was quite nice for us all to like put on like black tie and be around like all these amazing sets. And we did have a budget, so we had CGI rather than someone mixing a bucket, do you know what I mean? So it kind of so in that sense it was quite cool to kind of come onto set, and there are like all these amazing things, and I think that's what made it so fun to film. Yeah.
You said that, there's certain rules that you didn't worry too much about, but were there rules yourself in terms of how you were going to approach it, like how much modern tech they would bring with them, or, for example, how many real-life famous characters, as we see in the first episode, they would encounter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think originally, they kind of came with very little, and I think that helped. But I think I'm pretty sure in the second series, all of a sudden that they probably have a bit more than we originally let on to begin to start with. Why was that? Do you know what? I don't think that there was actually a reason for that, as far as I can remember. What was important is to make sure that they were stuck there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so so I think that probably played a big part in terms of what they could and couldn't bring. Yeah, and what was the second part of your question? It was...
What about famous characters?
Famous characters
history?
as well. Yeah, and then when you go through the series, there are a few more. And I suppose it's just fun, isn't it? It's just like when you can, like, doing John Lodi Bed was already quite funny. Then to get Kevin Eldon.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Oh my God, isn't he just incredible? Yeah. So when we were having discussions of who we could have, it was like, should we get Kevin Eldon? And I was like, well, we can't get Kevin Eldon. It's Kevin Eldon. But he was like, yeah, of course I'll come and do it. And I've always been a big fan of Kevin Eldon. So he like nailed it. And I think him doing it so well, like he sat and actually listened to the recordings of John Logie Baird. Yeah. And listened to so his voice, he's actually like replicating his voice and everything. But he would, And so there's like little bits in there. I wish I could claim that I wrote it all. I didn't. It was just Kevin just doing Kevin, and then just doing like little bits to just like elevate the humor, which was incredible. And so that meant that when we kind of we wrote more, we were like squeezing in some more characters. So I think more appear in series 2 than in series 1. I think. Don't quote me on that.
There's a sort of brush with one that I can remember in series 2, and I think maybe the title Timewasters, does that kind of refer to the fact that what they allude to a lot on screen is they don't really necessarily achieve that much.
Not a single thing. Yeah. And I think that's what Nick, my character, is most annoyed about. Yeah. It's just that we're not doing anything. You know what I mean? And throughout the series, I think, and from episode 2 onwards, I think the characters, if anything, have become a bit more defined as well. And I think that first episode kind of focused much more on Nick. As the series kind of goes on, you kind of delve into a bit more, and you kind of get to see more of Lauren and her like money-hungry ways, and Jason still chasing girls, and Horace just being in his own world and weirdly just fitting in.
and doing lots of great different voices, I noticed as well.
Oh my
He's
God.
so good at voices.
He's great at voices. He's an incredible singer. So originally there wasn't actually going to be singing in it. It was just him playing instruments. And then when we did the rehearsals, he was like, "Oh, do you want me to sing something?" It was like, "Oh, go in then. It will help." Not the rehearsals, the read through to get commissioned. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I'll sing something." And then this incredible voice came out. And I was like, "Why did you keep that a secret?" So we just kind of wrote that into every single episode, which was great. Yeah. And so, so it gets better as it goes on. Apart from episode 2 is not great. So if you do, if you're going to stick with the show, I think you have to get past 2 and 3. It starts well. It takes a bit of it does take a bit of a dip, but then it gets better. And then series 2 is even better than series 1. So,
series 2 is an absolute cracker, I
isn't it
have to
great?
say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all good, but really, watch the whole
That's the
thing.
better series, I think it's because we kind of figured out what it is a bit more.
It's also in 1958, which is a big difference.
Yeah, well, that helps as well. That helps. Where we end up in the second series, it's I think it's especially like when you compare it to series 1 as well. It's because it's like extravagance and so on and so forth. Whereas when you get to like post-war, there's not as much money, much more community, and everything that they were used to. They're not used to anymore. And also the consequences of what happened in series 1 come to light in series 2 as well.
Yeah, it's really, really good message. I know there isn't necessarily going to be a series 3, is that right?
No,
this is
not.
very upsetting.
Yeah.
If there were, what era would you go to?
Do you know what? I was actually developing a series 3 before they was like, so it was, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, we'll do a series 3." And so I was like, "Great." So I wrote stuff. And then they were like, "No, we don't want it anymore." But when I did, they were actually going to go to the future.
Oh,
yeah, I know. So it was like
I
3. I wanted to do 3 series, and then the last one would have been in the future. And then some of the stuff from series 2 would have played a part in series 3.
Oh, I really want to watch that.
No, I want to watch it too.
I want you to make it.
No
well, hopefully someo's listening somewhere and will throw some money at that and make it happen.
Yeah, I'm too old now. I can't.
No.
I can't get waterboarded like that.